and gentlemen, analysts and associates, welcome to your Managing Director Secretary's favorite podcast, the Big Swinging Decks Podcast by Litquidity and Mark Moran. This is not financial advice. You'd be a bottom bucket analyst to make investment decisions based on what is discussed on this show.
Lit, we're already kicking this one off laughing. Welcome back, everyone, to another edition of Big Swinging Decks. It's going to be an interesting one because, Lit, you know, we always find a way to make our way into the press, but now someone who we've been involved with has been in the press recently with CoinFlex. Anything that you'd like to kick off this podcast with about our friends?
It's tough, right? We are just, caught off guard with this whole situation, and think, it's an unfortunate type of situation that they've found themselves in with a debtor who feels like he doesn't owe them money, and it's, I don't know, but it does feel interesting to be caught in the middle of this, and here we are trying to record an episode on men's mental health, which, this situation has definitely weighed on that. So,
yeah. I would say from my perspective that we don't really have anything to say because we don't really know what's going on. We're getting the same information as everyone else is, which is mostly coming via Twitter. And that once we do know and have an understanding, that we'll be able to address that in full. But like Lit said, we're feeling rather blindsided. And I think in general, there's a lot going on in the crypto space, and a lot of things are falling. And it will be very interesting to see, in the coming weeks, the coming months, then, into the future of who really was, able to back up what they were saying with, various promises made and things like that. So this is going to be a journey for everyone, and for our shareholders who know about this and who have followed us since we started this podcast. It's not going to affect the podcast. We're still going to be doing the podcast, and, it's going to affect, what me and Lit are making probably. But other than that, we'll figure it out. So with that being said, this episode, Lit, as you alluded to, is going to be on men's mental health because it is Mental Health Awareness Month. And so we have a lot of questions that were submitted by the shareholders. But first off, we're recording this on Thursday, June 30th, which is really 2 days, but a day in the media after it was reported that there's a 22-year-old intern at Lazard who fainted and then fell on the subway tracks, and she was extremely tragically killed by a subway. And so our thoughts and prayers go out to her family, friends, colleagues, anyone at Lazard who was affected by this. There's a lot of rumors about, what's going on and all of that. And why was she taking the subway? We're not going to take a stance on that, especially on my old employer. And trust me, if I had anything to say on that or felt that I was verified in a way that I could, I would. But we will hold off. And, at this point, just wanted to, say publicly, how horrible and tragic this is. And unfortunately, it aligns with this mental health episode because if you are someone who knew her and are affected by this, definitely time to reach out to talk to someone about this.
Agreed, Mark. And, it's, again, we're not here to speculate. And some people have sort of speculated already in the DM saying, hey, was this work, driven, or was this medical or something? And we can't opine on that. And if we knew more, then that would be something that we would definitely weigh in on. But we don't want to minimize, the situation and the tragedy, really what happened there. So, yeah,
exactly. And it's unfortunate because, automatically people jump to it being work related. And because there have been, so many of these, the most recent one I can think of would either be the BAML kid in London or the one at Goldman in San Francisco. But, these things are just horrible. And so oftentimes when you're in an extremely stressful situation and then something like this happens, it can be the one thing that breaks you. So it will continue to emphasize this throughout the episode, but definitely reach out and never be afraid to speak with anyone about this and, just in general of anything that's going on in your life, because this is something, you see it. And for most people who are listening to this, who are deeply involved in the finance community, it's just heartbreaking that that could happen to someone, and it makes you, very much think more about how fragile life is and how quickly, it can be taken. So,
Yep.
should we kick this off with going into the shareholder submitted questions on not a positive note?
Yeah, let's do it.
It's kind of
hopefully
it's a
it's
heavy episode, honestly.
very heavy to start, and hopefully, we can sort of transition this seamlessly to a little more lighthearted, and also, it's stuff that we've addressed before in a prior episode on mental health topics. So this time around, we surveyed the shareholders and asked them, what do you want to hear about, right? Like, what are some topics about mental health that you think we should address that we didn't address before? So we'll be going through some of them, which some of them are pretty dark and serious, and then others are kind of like, hey, I mean, how do you cope with things that,
Yeah.
I think humor plays a big part in coping, and that's partly, where
Especially
why
dark humor.
why I started the page to begin with, right? Like, it was just you're stressed at work and needed an outlet, and I found that through humor. So, it's not times where like I laugh at things. It's not because I come from like a dark place, but it's more of, a coping mechanism of sorts. So that's just to preface, if we're laughing at some fucked up shit,
Yeah,
then
it's because we're fucked up.
because we're fucked up individuals. So let's get into it then.
All right. So, like you were saying, this is something that we are going to be alternating on serious to funny topics. I mean, I'm looking at the last one we have here, and it is surprisingly got many responses about how to deal with a small penis. And so we'll end with that one. But let's kick it off. So I want to first off ask you, and this is kind of a little bit further down, but I think it's a good way to start, right? Mm-hmm. So in terms of how to deal with burnout, depression, and crippling anxiety, I think those are all, three separate things to address, right? But let's talk about burnout, because right now is when a lot of second-year analysts are leaving their desks to go travel Europe and to go take a little bit of a break, a hiatus from working, if you will, until they start their PE jobs or buy-side jobs. And so it means that oftentimes this is when the first-year analysts really kind of are out there on their own. And it was always an interesting time when I was in banking as an associate to be able to deal with them at that point, because you're getting one kid from Swarthmore who, was a sociology major, and another who was, in the life sciences program at Wharton, who knows what they're doing. So it can be very a wide range. But
very specific.
Yeah. Well, actually, I don't think I ever worked with anyone from Swarthmore. I was just trying to think off the top of my head of like a Vassar or something. But I have a feeling Vassar is not. It's not a pipeline to Wall Street, as one would say.
Yeah.
But
no,
so how and you have a unique history with this because of the page. So maybe if you want to kick it off with kind of talking about that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say what I can talk to the most is burnout, and to some extent, anxiety. And really, burnout's just, you get to the point where you're just so fed up with the job, and you find it hard to motivate yourself to do more. And whenever you get a request, you're like, oh, like you drag your feet. And it's obviously something that people don't set out to do. I didn't set out to, be lazy or anything, right? Like I performed top bucket, and, like that was sort of, hey, like I'm doing something right, and not slacking off. But it came to a certain point in time that I was like, you know what, fuck this shit, right? Like I don't want to put up with, some bullshit dick VP or MD who's like unreasonable and whatnot. And I mean, the best way to do it was, fuck it, I'm leaving to what I thought was going to be a longer term job at another firm on the buy side. And like a few years later, just found myself in the same thing. And that's when I started the Instagram account, where it wasn't a big team like, investment banking, where my team had like a group of analysts and associates that were all kind of around my same age. And that was a way to, just, hey, after work, let's grab some drinks and just, chit chat, blow off some steam. But, the dynamics of a small private equity team is, people are just there to work and leave. And most of my colleagues were much older with kids, different stage of life. And I was like, hey, I'm going to turn to Instagram, which I found myself scrolling through and, laughing at my desk. And then I was like, I'll start to make some things myself and document some of the, like stupid shit that I go through and the frustrating things. And funny enough, a lot of people related to it and found it funny because it was self-deprecating, and they're like, I'm going through the same exact thing. So I think, the page definitely served that to an extent, and it continues to do so, where people come to know that they're not the only ones going through the boot camp type of mentality of Wall Street and just, the nature of working in a stressful, fast-paced environment.
And I think touching off of that, one thing is the Wall Street that you come to work on is very different than the Wall Street that's in your head. I think when like last or 2 weeks episodes ago, 2 weeks ago when we did the episode on IU Kelly, there was a lot of kind of this perception over reality type stuff that's going on. And I think that's something that really contributes to a lot of this, that it's a very different environment sitting on Excel for 16, 18 hours a day, under fluorescent lights, than it is watching, The Boiling Room or American Psycho, right? So there's that. But it's also something that everyone tries to be very tough on the outside, and they try to live up to a certain stereotype of who people, especially men, think that they're supposed to be. And I think that is where the problem is, that as a society, men are taught to be X, men are taught to be Y, but really what that does is, it often makes you kind of less able to show and share your emotion and to communicate things and to be able to talk about things in a healthy way. And I view doing stuff like this and being able to talk about it as ways to say, hey, listen, if you're a 18, 22-year-old kid, you're getting involved in banking right now, you're listening to this as you're a summer analyst at Bank of America or Canaccord or something. I'm going to try and name every bank randomly in this, that it's okay to do that, and that, like, we worked at great places and had a lot of success doing that and being ourselves. But if I were to look at my younger self, I would have wished that I had known that I never had to pretend to ascribe to a certain viewpoint or to try to be some person that, you think you have to be, but you really don't have to. And that's something that I think really leads to a lot of stress and to a lot of burnout and even to depression if you don't get it handled. I think all of the main things, whenever you're feeling stressed, anxious signs, that you should start talking to someone. And it can be almost kind of a JV attempt, like junior varsity, not joint venture attempt at talking to a therapist using Hello Talker, one of these apps, right? Try that out, see if you like it. And then if not, then try, looking at your health plan, see who's covered by for a therapist, and go speak with them and give it a few weeks. Like, you can't just you can't try anything once in life and say, okay, I'm never doing that again. Give it a few weeks and see if it's helpful. But that would be my first piece of advice. I think the other piece of advice too, and I think about this a lot because it's like I'd probably come across, especially on the internet, as someone who doesn't have any types of anxiety or whatever. And like I have social anxiety, general stuff sometimes, but like, everyone is a human being, and everyone gets nervous. Everyone has trouble communicating effectively sometimes, and it's important to realize that everyone else is going through the same thing you're going through, and that no one is some superhuman. No one, even a Blair Efron or a Robert Pruzan, they're not perfect human beings. Despite coming across that way most of the time, but I think it's okay to be able to be open and to show your flaws and be vulnerable, and that's something that, looking back into my professional career, I wish I had started doing sooner rather than later, because I think it would have made me a lot happier in the beginning.
Hmm. Yeah, I just had to take a moment to look up Blair Efron to
He's a
see if he was
legend.
related to Zach Efron, but he is a co-founder of Centerview. So okay, got it. But yeah, I do think that as you said, right, like people should definitely not let it get to the point where these anxious thoughts or your self-doubt or your burnout or whatever like consumes all your thoughts and it turns into depression because it's just a self-perpetuating hole to doom, and it's going to be much tougher to get out of it. And I think that's something that just in putting this out to the audience for them to ask about things was eye-opening, because there were a lot of responses in a very short amount of time, and it shows that it's not just a few people with these types of things in their mind. It's like it's indicative that a lot of people are now treating mental health as something that is legitimate and can't be ignored, which I will segue this into the next question. In It's kind of two parts. So one guy asked, how do you make some crusty old partner understand mental health is a real thing? And then the second question that's related to this was how were generations of bankers able to deal with banking, but we somehow cannot now? And it's like, what do you think about that, Mark?
So, Lit, great question. I have a few thoughts on that, but I think the way older generations look at younger generations is always going to be something where they had it the toughest, walk uphill both ways to school, and the kids now are privileged. And one quote that I want to bring up is, the children now love luxury, they have bad manners, contempt for authority, they show disrespect for elders, and love chatter in place of exercise. Children are now tyrants, now the servants of their household, not the servants of their household. They no longer rise when elders enter the room. They contradict their parents, chatter before company, gobble up dainties at the table, cross their legs, and tyrannize their teachers. And that was Socrates in 400 BC who said that. So I think there's always going to be a generational
The fuck are dainties?
contrast. Yeah. I don't know, man. I don't want to know what those are, but there's always going to be this generational divide. And how I think that it affects something like banking, big law, or consulting, where it's a service provider relationship where you can have some of these old guys who, they've been partnered for 20, 30 years and just living at the top, right? That you're going to start to see more turnover, as you already have, because there, you see these day in the lives of someone at LinkedIn, and it's like, that's a fake job. But not to everyone at LinkedIn, but to the one video I'm thinking of specifically, that was a TikTok. But you're going to start to see turnover from something like a finance or law if people aren't treated properly or according to the values of that time. We're seeing that, and it's coming to affect the partners because there's no one there to do the work, or the people who are doing it aren't as talented as others were. And so I think because of that, partners, and it's something that's only recently happened on Wall Street, is that there has been some pushback. You've been extremely instrumental with that, and that people are having to start to say, okay, the way things have been done in banking for so long, we can't do that anymore, because really it's a type of profession that is extremely unique, because it should be kind of a mentorship model that you're learning from the people above you, to how to speak to a CEO, how to read the room, all of these things. And in a Zoom world, that often doesn't happen sometimes, but it also makes it so it's just, we're different generations than people 20, 30 years prior. So I think things are trending in the right direction, but in no way, will you be able to flip a switch and really get someone who doesn't want to care.
Yeah, I agree on that. And it's, not re-education, because that's what China does to the Uyghurs. But, it's basically continuing education for, older generations to understand, like, hey, there have been advances in human psychology and medicine and whatnot, to say, look, some of the shit that you thought back then was just some nut job who was mentally, I don't know, possessed by a witch or something, is just like it these now have names, and now they now have treatments, and it's easier to like call them out and diagnose them, and and then like go after them. And when you think about it too, right, there are so many CEOs and athletes that have life coaches and therapists and all this stuff because they're in very high stress environments constantly with huge stakes at hand, and like that type of treatment should also be recognized and adopted by everyone, really, right? And so it's like recognizing everyone goes through some shit, and not stigmatizing it as much, and being able to do that without some boomer fuck thinking that all right, this guy's a pussy, or this girl is like weak or whatever, and yeah. So and then to the other part on how were prior generations able to do this. I think it's something that we weren't able to really see as transparently as we are now with social media, where everyone's plugged in, everyone's voicing their concerns and whatnot online and sharing it with the world. Two, pay was much better on Wall Street, so it's like pay
there were
definitely
fewer
helps.
options.
Fewer options, yep, exactly. And then the third thing was back in the day, you can easily just walk in and snort a line of cocaine on your desk, and just like cope with that, which obviously is not the right way to do it. But, those were things, or if you look at like Mad Men, which, as I will have to say, because people were like, well, Mad Men weren't investment bankers. They were, marketing execs on Madison Avenue. They always had like one of those decanters, with like whiskey or whatever that they would just drink in the office, and like it was much more, I guess, accepted, I'd say, or not as frowned upon. Like if you were to have a beer on like a random Tuesday, at your desk at work, they're like, dude, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah. Oh my God. You HR immediately.
Yeah. So
can't even go to a strip club anymore.
Right. Exactly. And like that's shit people used to be able to do and let off steam and, whatever. So it's definitely changed. So it's very different. There's more options now. And, so.
And I think too, it's a much more diverse workplace, and people, because of the transparency, people see, okay, this is what it's like. I could go be working in tech, working for 3 hours a day, getting paid roughly the same, all that stuff. We know why salaries have increased. We've touched on all that, but it's almost, this world of you have to go through a hazing process is something that it attracts a unique type of individual. I know it did to me. And because it's a very team-oriented environment, sports adjacent, and just an easy transition for a lot of people to make. So I always thought, I had some instances where I was not treated how I would have wanted to be treated. And I always thought, my thing is that I never want to pass down anyone's treatment, because I think a lot of it starts at the top and then gets passed down. And so as people get older, who are part of our generation or younger, so kind of millennials, Gen Z, I think you will start to see an improvement, because one, you have to have different people who are, working with more modern clients, right, who are amongst our peers in age. But it's just something that's different. There's also more technology too. And this job doesn't have to be some miserable 2-year pledging process. There can be a lot of fun. There's a lot of value that you can find in the job and purpose that can be driven if you're looking at it in the right way or doing things in a certain way. So that actually brings us to one question, which is, how do you find purpose or meaning in the work you're doing? And I'll start off with that, because I have a story that I haven't told, and I want to tell this story. So when I was at Lazard, I was probably, this is probably like 6 months in or so, and we would have these Friday morning meetings, and we would talk about potential new clients. It would be everyone on the team in the healthcare group. And we were discussing, this was kind of prior to really Purdue Pharma becoming a big name, but I had done some reading on the opioid crisis, so I was aware of them. And they brought up, the staffer at the time brought up that we are pitching them. And I raised my hand, and I was like, I think this is, historically, when you think about that Lazard represented a Remington, there was a lot of backfire with that this is something that, let's remove just the morality of it. You look at it from, the potential backlash from a reputational perspective, which will then affect the top line, and everything else. It's not good. And then I kind of kept talking, as I have a tendency to do, and started talking about my personal opinions on it. And that irritated some people. And at one point, the guy who was speaking, who was the staffer, he pulled me aside. He's like, maybe this job isn't for you. And I remember feeling so fucking incensed at that.
Yeah.
That someone would tell me that.
Yeah.
When I the people behind the Sacklers, they're going to the fucking VIP table in hell without bottle service, albeit the one with bottle service. But those people are just purely animals and horrible people who deserve everything that they have coming to them. And it was fascinating to have someone who, this guy, he's a staffer. He's making $600K. He's not going to be affected by this. It's not like he's getting paid by Purdue to be doing this and to be doing some shitty fucking restructuring thing. And it was just so wrong and immoral. But, people say, oh, I didn't have what it takes. Like, it's like, no, I have somewhat of a relatively decent moral compass. But that was something that I think about a lot. But, now, imagine having that meeting now. No, people would say it would be more acceptable to say something because it's more of an issue, and that just highlights the more people make an issue of stuff, the more things change. And we can be annoying, and people can say whatever they want about why we're doing stuff that we do, but oftentimes it's the loudest voice in the room that affects the change, and that's what we're trying to do here. And this is kind of the same thing. But so finding purpose, finding meaning. So I did healthcare banking, and I would always view it as, I mean, I went to Catholic school. I barely know science, so I really liked working in healthcare, though. Yeah. It's true. Yeah. It was no idea.
My brother in Christ, you just got to pray for a miracle here. Yeah.
Exactly. But I always liked working with these companies, especially diagnostic companies, because of some family stuff that I had that I felt relatable to it. But, you could actually see how, these two, like Exact Sciences and Genomic Health, like they're going to combine, and you're going to have the leading colorectal cancer test then combined with the leading certain type of breast cancer test. And they're going to be able to, get these certain synergies. Yes, people will be laid off, but then be able to, through doctor networks, target more people, all this stuff, right? And it's like that you feel good about that. You feel good about helping a company like that. You don't about Purdue, and you don't about a widget manufacturer in Kansas, right? So I was fortunate that I got to do a lot of healthcare stuff because I really felt meaning in that and enjoyed it. Am I curing cancer? No, but I never was going to be able to cure cancer anyway. So I look at it from that perspective. But it would always, dude, what would make me the saddest is when I would work with someone who went to medical school, who was in healthcare bank. It would like break my heart. And you're like, man, if I had that, the last thing that I'd be doing is fucking here with me. You're sitting next to me right now.
Yeah.
Like, damn.
Yeah. I think it like that would probably come in handy, like having that medical background when you are trying to win over a client that's very technical or like biotech and like really tough to understand, which I was in TMT, and I think like there were ex-engineers who then got their MBA and then came over, and they were like deep in this like enterprise tech B2B shit that I was like, I don't fucking know like what these like components and whatnot that increases bandwidth and frequencies, and I'm like, oh, you know what, like I like SaaS, like just the idea of software and recurring revenue and media. And I was like, oh, media is great. Like you make content, you monetize, right? Like it's very simple to understand. So I'm kind of with you on that. But finding meaning in work for me was like, the only meaning was, hey, let me pay down student debt and not have to fucking deal with that overhang for the rest of my life, which a lot of people, end up having to do. But at the same time, like when I was on the phone with clients and whatnot, like I would realize, hey, I am helping to some extent, right? Like as an analyst, you're just putting together a presentation that would hopefully help convince a buyer to make a investment or acquire the company, which could change the life of the CEO and all the employees underneath them. And it's like, okay, we're doing something, right? And so like that's how I kind of did it. But when I was in private equity, I spent some time in real estate acquisitions and funding developers who wanted to tear down buildings and erect like a huge apartment building, and it would be in an up and coming neighborhood, and you would be underwriting rents that would be outpacing inflation, or at least to inflation. And you're like, look, we're targeting this to a high end customer, and we're just that's it, right? Like we're gonna have to kick out some people or displace others because it becomes too expensive. And that's where I was like, yo, like this is kind of fucked up. When you think about it, it's very capitalistic, but at the same time, like real estate acquisitions and landlord, like type of, that kind of dynamic to me didn't sit well. And I was like, I can't like, feel like I'm just here to raise rents and that's how I generate a return. And yeah, so I was like, you know what? I think that's probably not for me in the long run. And private equity in general, which, I think like can become a very financial engineering type of thing, but it's if done right, then
listen, we got goddamn kids out here working their heart and soul off to provide liquidity for the financial markets. All right, so we have people doing the Lord's work. Okay.
Yeah, I am fucking not giving a good way to cope. I'm just bitching right now. But
I think too, like, because it's like. I mean, sometimes it's bad, man. I like my life mentor who was at Lazard prior to me, and he's taking some garden leave right now because he's gonna go take a nice head of X at a very nice bank job. But he told me one day, he's like, I knew I had to change something in my life when I was walking across the street and I thought, I don't care if I get hit by a car. And there's all these ways that we try to fill the loneliness or the void in our lives at certain times, whether it's buying stuff or doing drugs or going out to dinner, all these things. So why don't we talk about that? Because we have a few questions that, kind of, okay, there's the one about the blacking out, which, okay, this kid's not blacking out 4 times a week. Like, no, you're not. Sounds like me in law school. Kidding. But, there's that. There's different ways to kind of find meaning that never works. And I want to wrap that into the question about how to date as a banker. How do you have meaningful relationships with people and communicate? It's all these things that I think oftentimes you think doing something with your limited time and resources is going to improve something, and it doesn't. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk about the drinking and drugs side of things. I don't indulge on hard drugs, but drinking something that I can speak to much more, where I think a lot of people can have a healthy relationship with alcohol, and then a very dark one where it's used to wash down depression and anxiety, and like that's where you have to change some sort of behavior there. But if you're doing it as a social lubricant and just having a good time and meeting people and whatnot, like I think that's a good way, right? Like without overdoing it, to just blow off steam and get your head off of the stresses of work. And I would say that's probably what I would do. And then also, like having to sort of make time for yourself to say, okay, if I do have downtime, not to just go back home and just sleep or like wither on the couch. It's fucking do something, because you're only in your early 20s once, and might as well just rally and have some good time and foster meaningful relationships.
I like that. That's very, very well worded, Lit. I think from my perspective, so for drinking, I'm Irish. I like to drink. I enjoy, to quote Brett Kavanaugh, I enjoy drinking, and I still do. Beer. All Catholic girls' school, automatic. But look, I like drinking, a lot, but it's also like being Irish, alcoholism. That's something that's predisposed in my family, being Irish in general. So I've always been aware, and I also I barely drank in college because I was running track, and so it wasn't something that like I kind of had a whole 4 years of just doing that all the time. But
that's why you're in shape.
Yeah, well, and so when I started working, then I would kind of tell myself, okay, I'm only gonna drink if I had exercise today. That would be like the first kind of mental game that I played with myself. And then I think the big thing is you really have to be honest with yourself about why you're drinking. And if you're drinking because you're having a glass of wine to relax and do whatever, or if you're hitting the hard stuff, you're hitting some Jack Daniels just like on a Tuesday by yourself. Why is that? And I think I can be realistic enough in myself to know that I've done both of those, right? And I remember at one point, the girl I was dating at the time, she was like, you're starting to like become mean when you drink. And I've never had anyone say that. It was always like a very nice, like happy person when I was drinking. I was like, oh, I think because there's this shift inside me where I'm not that happy, and then now it's coming out. And so then I was like, okay, I'm gonna take a month off. Did like dry whatever the month was, and that was something that it's like, okay, I did not drinking do anything for me? No, I thought it was stupid. I was complaining the whole time, honestly, but I wanted to, prove something to myself, but also see. And it's like, so for me, the solution wasn't to just not drink, like, it's still to have a drink or two here and there, but to really kind of understand, okay, I need to address this within me, and it's not being addressed by drinking. It's not being addressed by anything else. And so it's like, what's the root structure? And then kind of that's, one of the things that led me to speak with someone. So there's a lot of internal work that you really have to say, okay, why am I doing this? Why am I blacking out on the weekend? Or why am I resorting to X drug or doing something? And I think it's a lot easier to just go home every day and do whatever it is that's your kind of escape rather than to address it within yourself. And that's something that I think the whole crux of this is go talk to someone. There's nothing wrong with it. And if there's one takeaway, it's that it is more than okay to be able to talk about what's going on in your life. And people care. People will listen.
Yeah,
whether they're paid to or not.
Yeah, and one thing that I've found in terms of trying to isolate what is, whenever I feel anxious or whatnot, is like, hey, okay, what I love to do is play certain sports, right? And that's usually tennis or golf. And like, I can be in the heat of the moment in terms of just like feeling super anxious and like not wanting to get out of bed. I'm like, fuck this or whatever. But then forcing myself to go to play a round of golf, for example, and just like hang out with the fellas and drink a couple beers, and it's like no anxious thought, like just completely the last thing on my mind is work and all the like stress and whatnot, and it's finding that escape that really helps. And I think that's kind of like people have to just find what they love to do, and just set some time aside. And so like, even if that's 5-10 minutes or whatnot, like, if you're like working 100 hours that week, just like, you got to take some time to just like, there is downtime when you're working 100-hour weeks, don't get me wrong. Right. So like, that's when you should try to do something or think about something that brings you that kind of like relief and happy thoughts. But obviously, it's easier said than done, but you got to try to do it rather than just saying it's not going to work and letting yourself, wither away.
Yeah, and I think too, I'm trying to formulate what I'm trying to say with this because I think it's helpful, but I don't exactly know how to formulate. So when I know, like, I was dating a girl for most of my time during banking who, like, I was like, oh, we're going to get married, blah, blah, blah. And I would say I was probably the one who changed more in it than her. And so in thinking back to it, because like I've been single for a while, but now in trying to kind of assess certain flaws in my personality or whatever in dating and stuff, I think about it, it's like, okay, what was it that led me to do this or whatever? And I think the big thing was I started when you feel like you're losing control in a lot of aspects of your life, which you do in banking oftentimes or any service provider job because you're not in control, it's easy to then cope by trying to get greater control on other people in your life. And so going into kind of the dating as a banker question, I would say that was one thing that I look back at myself then, and I wish I could see how that's the opposite of how you need to be, reacting to anything, that you never want to overcompensate by trying to be more in control in one other aspect of your life when you're losing control and, say your job, right? And you can focus it through exercise, you can focus it through whatever, but you have to be able, because I would think a lot of people who are listening to this, who are in banking, are hard on themselves. That's what, led someone to get to Wall Street. And I know I'm extremely hard on myself. And I think a majority of people listening to this, can understand, that they are too. And you have to be nicer to yourself. And that wasn't something that I really learned, honestly, until I was on F-Boy Island. Like, one of the producers was like, you need to be nicer to yourself. And I never had anyone say that to me. And it was something that I think more people need to, hear it, be repeated, or to internalize that, because everyone is so hard on themselves. And you don't have to be. That no one's perfect. And that's kind of with at least my internet presence, I'm mocking myself, making fun of myself all the time now. I post unhinged stuff, but I think the point I'm trying to get across, like, I can make fun of myself more than the next person, right? But it's important to be able to do that and not take everything as an insult or seriously. And that's just in our roles now is how we do it. But, to be nicer to yourself about everything and just dial it back and be able to like sit and relax, which is often something that, if you're cracked up on Adderall, you're not going to be able to at the end of the day, and just like, give me a drink. But there's a lot of ways to think about it. But I think just the concept of being nicer to yourself is something that everyone, like, God knows what the fuck's going on in the world right now. It's like, I mean, is it the end of time? Who knows? You look at Arbitrage Andy's post, he's doomsday prepping, so maybe we need to do that with him. I don't know, but there's a lot of bad things going on, and I think it's okay to just, no one has the solutions, and we're supposed to be the adults in the room. We don't know what's going on. So, it's okay to sit back and just be a little bit nicer and relax a little bit more on things.
Yeah, I agree. And, I'm not doomsday prepping, but,
not yet.
Yeah.
Listen, he could be right.
He could be right. Look, and if Andy's listening to this,
we should get him on.
Yeah.
Will he come on the podcast?
He probably would. I think so.
Yeah, because we can change his voice and stuff. Yeah, let's reach out to him.
Yeah, maybe we do that.
I want him to sell me on doomsday prepping.
Yeah, we'll just try to leave some politics out of it, because I know we all have some beliefs and sides of things.
We
but
all have different beliefs. Actually,
we can respect
that's
people.
A great.
Yeah,
we can exactly. That's a great transition.
Yeah.
To this. So this question, which is obviously relevant because of what's been going on, but how can men be of allies to women, especially given Roe v. Wade?
Ooh,
and
yeah.
I had posted about it a few times. Let me tell you, I lost some followers, and I probably had like 200 positive responses, like 12 negative, but those 12 negative were really personally attacking me.
Right.
So I have my thoughts, but I want to hear yours. How do you feel that men can be allies to women? Is that the right approach? Should men stay neutral? What do you think?
Fuck, man, you're putting me on the spot here.
On the spot. That's why we're here.
So I didn't post anything because, for me, I'm trying not to wade into something.
And you're gender neutral.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Anyway, so I love all genders, man. No, but I think that the way that men can do this is really just to listen and support like what their female friends and colleagues are going through. And at the end of the day, right, like, you don't know what it feels like to be holding a baby inside of your body, and like what that kind of means, like, emotionally, right? Like, it's something that a man can't really conceptualize, or you can try to understand, but you probably won't, right? And so I think like just being able to say, look, I mean, I'm not gonna be so like anti something, or this is the way it should be because I think I'm right. When you're a guy, right, like, that's just not gonna work. And secondly, I mean, this doesn't even go into the politics of it, but you're just going to come across as an incel on social media when you're like, yo, all right.
So many incels recently.
Yeah, right. And so it's like, if you're trying to get laid and you're like, yo, fuck this, and abortions are they should be whatever, and you're just like at war with women. Like, that's not a winning strategy to get laid. But going back to supporting to women and being an ally, it's definitely listening to them, right? And I think that's what a lot of people don't do. A lot of guys are just very opinionated and just like to hear themselves talk and be like, I'm right about everything, and get their points from certain social media accounts or news outlets, and they just go off of that. And I mean, for me, honestly, like, I think this is what a lot of people don't know. And when they look at like Lit Newsnet, for example, right, they say, oh, it's like a right-leaning account or whatever. But then when I shit on the conservatives, they're like, oh, this turned into like CNN Plus or whatever, you're a flaming lib, or you must have changed your admin. I'm like, like, I've never said that I'm MAGA or a social justice warrior, right? Like, I to put my political spectrum or inclinations or whatever, I'd say I'm pretty center on things. And it's very typical to hear socially liberal and fiscally conservative, and I'd say like that's, if I were to just make it as simple as possible, that's kind of where I lean. So like I support women and their choice on this, and I'm just not gonna make any friends with this statement, but fuck it, right? So yeah, I'll just leave it at that. It just comes down to listening. It's like, I mean, I'm not personally going to go out and march. I'm not like a protester at heart, but that's another way, to show support if you so feel inclined to do that.
Yeah, I think on my end, so I already said earlier in the episode, I went to Catholic school. We would go to the March for Life and shit, which, like, looking back is just fucking wild, because they choose, all right, do you want to go to school, or you want to go walk around DC? Like, hell yeah, I'm walking around DC. But I was talking like with one of my classmates, and we were like, what the hell was going on? Like, we didn't even understand what it really was at all. You just like see these pictures of fetuses all the time. It was very odd, very odd. So that's Catholic school. But for me, I'm someone who politically, I'm supportive of, a woman's right to choose. And it was interesting to me because I wasn't planning on saying anything until one of my producers from F-Boy Island reached out to me. She's like, you need to say something about this. And I kind of thought at first, I was like, okay, like, I'm fucking, niche internet celebrity when it comes to, 22 to 24-year-old men in finance, right? Like, what am I going to fucking say? Why would I say something? You look at the fucking lunatic stuff I'm posting on my Instagram story and then going into a serious statement. But I thought about it, and it's like, when you think about what's going on, that it's like you're saying, there's the whole listening aspect to it. But the other aspect that I look at it is that a man doesn't have the right to tell a woman what to do with her body. And we live in a society where that apparently, is not true. But then if you start there, then you start and you start to see the rollback of protections for various groups of marginalized people at the state level. And you start to see, okay, like, there are bullies in the world, and they'll continue to do this shit if no one stands up to them. And when I think about it in that way, like, I don't know, I'm a bully, but I'll bully people who deserve it. And so I was like, all right, so I typed something out that I thought was thoughtful, and the responses that people got or gave me that, that it was meaningful to them to have someone like me speak out about it and everything. I was like, oh, okay, I guess, Dory was a producer, and I was like, I guess she was right. I need to start thinking about this more as like having a platform rather than, kind of just not saying anything. And so I thought that was kind of a cool thing to learn, because no one's perception of themselves is how it actually is. So that was interesting. But look, I think everyone can do it in their own different way, and some people are going to be more comfortable than others in saying things vocally and saying things publicly. And if you're sincere about something, then talk about it in whatever ways you want to, and don't be ashamed. But if it's something that and on either side, because and it's like our argument, or not our argument, but our discussion on the IU Kelly stuff. You're always going to have your extreme right and your extreme left on everything, and so as long as you can kind of listen and look at things from we're not enemies, but politically everyone's an enemy now, because all we see is ultra conservative stuff on OAN Newsmax, or ultra liberal stuff on MSNBC, and there's nothing in the middle. And and that's why I was so disappointed that CNN Plus went out of business, because I was really hoping that they would be the ones to do that, but I guess not.
They were not going to do that. Yeah,
no, I know. But look, I think it's just important to take a step back and realize we all have a lot more in common than we do differently. But for things like this, stand up if you feel that you have a voice, and a lot more people will be thankful for you to do so than you'll realize.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, look, I have these beliefs, and maybe I should be more vocal about it, but at the same time, like, I also don't just want to have to take a stance on every fucking thing, because it's like, why should a anonymous
it's like, what's the
page,
thing we're upset about today?
Yeah, and it's like, I don't need to have a statement about everything. Obviously, this is very different and unique and monumental in terms of women's rights and whatnot, but like, I just it gets too much, right? Like, there's one person that would get thousands of DMs, and they'll be supportive, but then a ton of hate messages on, like, I know exactly what I think personally, and like, that's kind of like myself. But I guess people are now going to hear this and know that, hey, look, leans or not leans, it's pretty center, and maybe, I don't know if libertarian's the right word, but I'm like, look, whatever the fuck you want to do it. As long as you're not fucking with anyone else. That's my thing, right? Like, if it comes to sex, if it comes to drugs, whatever, like alcohol, like, it's up to the human to do whatever they want, right? If they want to abort a child that they don't think they're gonna be able to support 100%, or they're not going to be a good parent to them, like, why force them to have a child? So I will leave that statement there, and then go back to one of the more lighthearted type of questions.
Let's get a
here.
light one.
So, Mark, you said before that you wanted to focus on things, or sometimes you can't control certain things, right? And these were some of the questions that we got about that you alluded to before, with some guys saying, hey, like, how... Well, actually, there were a lot of these responses when I asked the question about, what topics should we discuss? And they're like, what do you do with the tiny peen or a small pecker, or, all this stuff? And that is one part of the question where it's, guys who are dealing with relationship issues, low libido due to overworking, porn addiction, like fapping in the office handicap stall and shit like that.
I did. You know what? I did it, and everyone loves it on Twitter. So I'm not going to deny it.
So it's kind of like, how do you kind of deal with the relationship side of things when you can't really be present there, and it's like sexual satisfaction for a guy is like a pretty big thing normally, and like, what do you do there?
I think how I want to address all of this, because it's something everyone has their own things that they struggle with, right? Like as a male, and how it relates to interacting with women, men, whatever. That meme of Pete Davidson, and he's with the Kardashian. I don't know which one he's with, but he's with the Kardashian, and it's like, she let me hit because I'm goofy or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, just be yourself and like funny. Like, girls, women love. I have to say, women. My mom always is like, whenever I say girl, she's like, no, you mean woman, and she'll always correct me. So I'm correcting myself, saying woman.
Nice.
So women love when you're just goofy. You can laugh at yourself. You don't take things too seriously, which who knows what that means. But when you can just kind of be fun. At the end of the day, make someone laugh at you, and it's okay to use your. I always make fun of myself, and I think that's something that like plays is with people. And so people want to laugh. People want to be listened to. Oh, yeah, I'm going to talk about this. This was good. The concept of validation as a male, I didn't know what that was, right? The whole idea of like, if someone you're dating or a woman's like, okay, I'm stressed because Sarah at work is blah, 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 and like Justine wants to fire me. And, you know, like the normal crap, like you get home from banking your dick off all day, and then you have to listen to like drama in the workplace. You're like, I don't even know who, and you know, you're just there and you're like, okay, here's what I would do, XYZ, blah, blah, blah. And then that's the exact opposite of how you should handle anything, because the concept of validation is something that I learned probably last year, and it's really, that's what people want when they're, you know, expressing what they're going through and their trials and tribulations, and people want to be heard and listened to and validated, and that oftentimes you don't have to respond with a solution. And I think as men, especially men who work in investment banking, you're naturally geared towards coming up with the solution. And it really, like, I read this whole, I'll find the book and I'll post it, but How to Hear, Listen, Validate or something is what it was called. But it was very eye-opening, because I was like, oh my God, I never viewed that as being important, because isn't the solution to something more important? And really it's not. It's the whole process of being able to help someone to know that you're listening, you understand them, and you're hearing them, and you're there for them. And so I think that's also something that probably for a lot of the people listening to this to kind of put in the back of your head and think about, that's one of the most important traits that that no one's really taught. And if you did know it going into the job, you probably don't know it afterwards.
Yep. And, you know, just to wrap this up, to address this whole thing about, you know, the whole, I don't even know why like so many people were concerned about a small penis, but it's interesting to know and have a data point. Is
there a correlation of people with small dicks going in investment banking? I wouldn't be surprised.
We can survey the audience and you know, do a regression analysis.
How
and whatnot,
funny would that poll be? Be like, vote on your side. Honestly, no one's done that before.
Yeah, but you know, I think it comes down to it is a form of bullying to an extent where people are kind of, you know, saying, hey, like you either have to have a 12-inch dong, or, you know, it's small and whatnot, or, you know, short kings versus being over 6'2". And it's like, look, I think you can be short, fat, bald, and still find a wife. You know, I think like, I mean, the first person that comes to mind is Danny DeVito, who's hysterical as fuck, right? And a great guy. And it's like, look, just live your life and someone will love it. And if like, you know, someone's just making fun of you for that type of shit, like, then move on and find someone else, right? There's plenty of fish, you know, in the sea. And like, as generic as that sounds, it's like, just say fuck it and move on. And so whatever, if you have a small peckers, you can't control that, you know, so whatever. That's
and like think about it from a strategy perspective, right? Speaking specifically to your average male who is an analyst and associate in New York, right? Who's working in banking. I mean, come on, everyone pretty much looks the same, right? Like physically, you don't face that much competition from these other people, right? It's so differentiate yourself in a way. Like think about it from a business perspective. Like what's your protective moat? Are you funny as fuck? That's your protective moat. Like does your dad have a Hamptons house? That's probably a lot of guys' protective moats. But then, you know, when they suck as a person, where's that going to get you? And so, you know, think about what it is about you that makes you unique, and what it is about you, you know, that you like doing. And, you know, if it's making a meme and impressing a girl that way, or like, I love, like, whenever I'm talking to like someone new, like I'll like put her in a meme and like send it, you know, or like one of those Pineapple Farm things, hits every time, right? And so it's just about doing things differently. The one thing though, before I'm done rambling, because we're kind of pushing up on some time here, is our producers like finish it up. So the last thing I'll say, so hair loss, because I always get comments on my hair. So I take Propecia, and I've been taking that since I don't know, it's probably like 26. And so what that does is like it prevents you from losing hair. and I recommend it. There's a few, like you actually do, you take it, and then you have to see if you're kind of having any sexual side effects. And, fortunately I wasn't, so I kept taking it, and it's been great for me. And I always tell people, like, I have no problem, making fun of my hair or anything, but I always tell people that once I start losing it, I'm going to go get the surgery. And then some people, like, dude, some woman was mocking my hairline on Twitter. And I was like, yeah, but if I post a picture of you eating a whole chicken that's been sent to me, then I'd get canceled. So, I think it's one of those things. Like, stress obviously, plays into this, right? And there's all these online pharmacies and stuff that you can do to get Propecia or whatever the finasteride is, the generic, all this stuff. But to go talk to someone, and then if you want to get the surgery, Turkey is apparently the best place to go. So if you see me in Turkey walking around, just mind your own business in the future. 5 years from now.
All right, and with that said,
all right.
we're done.
We're done here. I hope this has been an enlightening one. It's been heavy, but we appreciate everyone, and we will be coming back to you next week.
This has been Big Swinging Decks by Litquidity with your hosts, Lit and Mark Moran. This is a Red Rock Music podcast. Our executive producer is Red Yoakum. Our associate producer is Emma Martins. For more, follow us on Instagram at Litquidity and at It's Mark Moran, or visit the official website, litquidity.co. So tune in weekly to your Managing Director Secretary's favorite podcast, available wherever you listen to podcasts.